What I do want to start with, though, is how exciting I think it is for all of us to take a moment and reflect, as we did this morning, on the people who helped to shape who we are today. Whether they were great mentors or mentors that you didn't even realize were mentors at the time, they shaped who we are today. So I want to share my mentorship stories with you. I was so fortunate to start university here in Calgary and have Dr. Bill Costerton, as my cell biology prof. I didn't know it at the time, but in his academic community, he was known as the king of slime because of his groundbreaking work on biofilms that some of you may be familiar with. At that time, biologists really focused on petri dishes and shaken cultures as the media for growing microorganism cultures. And he looked at it very differently. He said, you know what, I think that these cultures actually grow on any hydrated surface, whether that's rock in a mountain stream or that has been isolated from a pacemaker lead in an infected patient. We can actually grow these cultures in a lot of different ways. And it started me to think about, wow, this is really interesting, not just from the point of view of, oh, we get to look at microorganisms for their phenotypic differences like antibacterial properties or slow growth rate or those kinds of things, but there's something else here that I hadn't experienced in high school, and that's innovation. We can actually be going beyond what all the scientists before us have done and learned that really well. We can also be thinking about what else? What does the future look like? What's the innovation that's coming out of what we're learning? That lit a spark for me. Now, fortunately for me, he was not the only bright light in the department. And then there was Dr. Den. He was that typical mad scientist, you know, the one with the hair and all that. And he would come literally running in to that huge lecture hall of first-year students, you know, the ones that have like 300 students. He would run in, plant himself at the front of the room and say, "It boggles the mind." And we'd all go like, you know, 18-year-olds, what? What you talking about? And then he would tell us about all those cool things that were happening in his research lab. And I kid you not, all of us in our little 18-year-old butts were right at the edge of our seat going, what else? What else? Tell me more. How come it's so exciting? What's so boggling the mind about this? And that lit the second flame for me. It was not just about the science, which was pretty incredible, I have to tell you, but it was also about how he engaged us, all of us, in the learning. And that has become my life's work. I now feel like it's how important it is, not just to explain the STEM or the science or the engineering or the design process or the robotics or whatever it might be. It's about how do we engage every student to feel like I want to sit at the edge of my seat going, what are you talking about? And could I have a little piece of that, please? So that's what I bring to you today in terms of what I see as a disruption, perhaps, to how we might think of mentorship and think of even some of the things that we talked about this morning. So I hope you don't mind being disrupted. I guess my goal for the next few minutes is to help you think, or to ask you, to challenge you to think about what else could mentorship be? And this is why. In my experience, my 30 years of teaching, I've been involved in lots of mentorship programs with youth and trying to connect youth to industry professionals and subject matter experts. And one of the challenges that I've always found is that we have a lot of kids who are interested, and yeah, a lot of mentors who are interested, but there's not enough. There's simply not enough to do the wonderful things that Evan talked about in terms of one-on-one relationship. We know how important that is. But what about all those other kids who don't get that opportunity for a one-on-one relationship with a mentor? So that's caused me to think about what actually is mentorship. And I know it's come up at the tables, like how do we define mentorship actually? What does it mean? So that's my goal, to think about what mentorship actually is. And you know, mentorship is an ancient philosophy, really, right? It goes back to Socrates and probably beyond. And what you may not know is about that same time, mentorship was happening with our Indigenous people here on this land as well. And all of them, from Socrates to our Indigenous elders, recognized that asking questions of their protégés was far more important than giving them answers, providing those answers. And so we know that it's the asking of the questions that's very important in a mentorship relationship. My university students right now, I teach a first-year course on Introduction to Educational Studies. So these are kids that are right out of high school, coming from your classes, some of them. They have only seen education through a student's eyes, and we challenge them to now think, okay, well, what other perspectives are there? Guess what? There's parents, there's other teachers, there's administrators, there's Alberta Education, there's stakeholders. And they're starting to identify what they think about in terms of mentorship as well. And they've come up with this distinction of, we think that there are critical friends, and then we think that there's also mentors. So I want to just throw that out to you because it's coming from them. What's the difference between a critical friend and a mentor? What's the difference between a critical friend, a mentor, and a sponsor? What might those definitions actually be? And can we throw them up in the air and create some new ones? The story of my mentors, and probably yours as well, is pretty much the regular definition of mentor, right? A teacher, an advisor, a role model, someone that the mentor actually takes the mentee and guides them, advises them along in a particular direction. And that's great, and it works really well. But again, going back to, what about those kids who don't have that adult to help them along? Think about it for yourself, whether it's students in your classroom, your own children, your nieces, nephews, whatever. What if they did not have an adult, a mentor, to help guide them along? What would that be like for them? So while it's very effective for a small group of people or small group of students, it's not enough for everybody. I believe that mentoring in the 21st century is a lot more than just one-on-one. I believe it's about looking at all of our students, all of our children, and saying, how can we promote them to be innovators in the 21st century? It's not enough to just know the knowledge. It's important, but it's not enough. How do they get to be innovators themselves? And why did that become important to me? Well, my career took me from urban to rural to remote regions of the province. And what I saw was that while there are some students who have this connection to a mentor, like through iGEM or other mentorship opportunities, Operation Minerva is another one some of you may be familiar with. The vast majority did not. And so scalability became, when we talked about obstacles earlier, scalability to me is one of the most important obstacles to mentorship as we know it right now. How do we make sure that every child, so you're hearing my philosophy of education coming through here, every child has the opportunity to have an adult mentor of some kind in their lives to help them through. I also believe that we're in an era of innovation. And so we are past what Peter Drucker in 1959 called the knowledge economy. We're way past that, right? We are in an age of innovation. So we need to be thinking about every single one of our students being innovators, whether it's academically, intellectually, artistically, in a social entrepreneurship kind of way. They need to be looking at how do we innovate in the 21st century. I think, I've lost my spot a little bit here. One of my mentors, outside of Dr. Din and Dr. Costerton, my mentor today is Dr. Tony Wagner, who is out of the Harvard University, actually. And he says that knowledge is ubiquitous, right at our fingertips. If you want to know something, where do you go? Google is your best friend, right? So knowledge is ubiquitous, but what's not are the skills, the attitudes, the ability to think critically and creatively, the ability to work with other people in groups and collaborate, the ability to be able to problem solve. And we heard a lot about like project-based learning or problem-based learning. Those things are not ubiquitous. You cannot learn them on YouTube. But we do want to maintain that academic rigor. What I'm suggesting is that it's not enough, though, as I said earlier, for them to just know how to build a robot. It's great, but it's not enough. It's one small component of a much larger mosaic of what STEM actually is. We need to have innovators that are going to come up with more and better ideas to solve more and different kinds of problems. Coronavirus is a great example of that. We hear about all these kinds of things in the news. So actually, innovation and mentorship is more about habits of mind than it is about knowledge. So I want you to think about, when you consider mentorship, what are the habits of mind, the cultures of your particular discipline that you're sharing with young people? What are those, as opposed to what's the actual knowledge? They can figure that out. What are those other things? All right, so why? Why think about mentorship differently? It's working. We're good. Why should we disrupt it and turn things upside down? One of the reasons I have notes up here is because I want to share some research and some stats with you. And it's not dry, really. It's not. I promise. Here are some stats. Nicole Letourneau and Susan Tuff here at the University of Calgary have identified that 30% of Canadian youth do not have a mentor, an adult mentor of any kind, let alone a STEM mentor. No mentor of any kind. Some of the teachers in the room are probably going, yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. They're missing out because there simply are not enough mentors to go around. Statistics Canada says that while women represent the majority of university graduates, they are underrepresented still in STEM fields. A study out of Ryerson University says that globally, women account for the minority of the world's researchers globally. My colleagues Nadia Delanoy and Erin Spring have been doing research in rural Alberta, and this actually shocked me. They said that girls report, and this is like middle school, junior high school girls, report feeling stuck, inadequate, and disengaged from studies or careers that will take them outside of familiar surroundings and people. So we're clearly still not doing enough to support girls. The other group I want to talk about is Indigenous youth, who are the fastest growing demographic in Canada, but are, again, underrepresented in STEM fields. Partly, not entirely, but partly because they feel a disconnect between STEM and Indigenous ways of knowing. I want to ask you, is there a way that we can rethink mentorship so that we can actually value the richness of Indigenous knowledge and the diverse perspectives that are needed for tackling complex issues in our world, but that don't mean our Indigenous youth have to leave behind their traditional ways of knowing? Doug Dokas, director of the Indigenous Youth in STEM Initiative, suggests that and we've heard this already before, he says, start developing your mentors when those children are being mentored. Give them an opportunity while they're being mentored to see themselves in these roles, STEM professions, but beyond that, as mentors for the next group of people, of youngsters, because that is how Indigenous communities are built, right? That's how Indigenous communities are built. And again, they need to know that they don't have to leave or abandon their traditional ways of knowing. So my point with all these statistics really is to just say that while traditional mentorship is working, we need to expand it. We need to make it bigger. We need to reach more kids. Some other whys for considering new approaches to mentorship come from what we actually know about the students who are in our schools today. And if you're into this, they're identified as Generation Z and now Generation Alpha. Apparently we know some things about them though, and you will know these things. They are very skilled in navigating digital tools and have a way of thinking digitally that connects things together and diverges. Does that sound familiar? That kind of almost design thinking approach. How do we converge? How do we diverge? How do we converge again? They're pretty comfortable with doing that with the technologies that they have. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't concerns and issues with the way that technology is used, but let's make no mistake, they know how to use it. We need to help them use it effectively. And that goes back, was it you, John, that talked about depth and breadth? So we've got this breadth, we need to help them go deep. For them, technology is not just a toy, but it's a way of living, connecting, communicating, and learning. When we talk AI, they're past us. They learn how to interact with Siri and Alexa almost by the time they learn how to speak. Hello, Google, right? They use technology to interact with and connect with content and demonstrate mastery in ways that maybe some of you as teachers and parents will agree is beyond what we can do. They expect diversity in their learning and their learning environments, and they want personalization and expect meaning and purpose behind their learning. Let me give you an example. A group of 8-year-old boys, 8-year-olds, told a researcher that they were working on a special project of their own. And that project was to determine if everything that their teacher taught them in a week could just as easily have been learned with quality resources from YouTube or other places on the internet, right? They were asking, wait a second, why do we need to be in this classroom if we could learn all this stuff somewhere else on our own time in a modality that's more comfortable to us? They are not impressed with traditional ways of learning. They want something new. But if we turn that coin around and say, okay, if that's what they want, how can we as mentors start to capitalize on some of that and use it for our mentorship opportunities? How can we get to them in different ways? All right, so that's all well and good. But so how do you do it? How do you do it? I want to present to you that I think that there are a couple of conduits that help us as subject matter experts and industry people to get into every single classroom. And that's what I'm interested in, that scalability. How do I reach every single kid somehow? I think the first conduit is teachers. And God bless you all that are here. Teachers are mentors for every single child in their classroom. Whether you know it or not, whether they tell you that or not, you are a mentor. And we need to support these teachers in their classrooms regardless of where they are. Fort Chipewyan, Lethbridge, inner city Calgary, we need to support those teachers. And although many universities, like the University of Calgary, offer mandatory courses for pre-service teachers on STEM learning, we still have reports that teachers don't feel necessarily really comfortable with a STEM emphasis. Some more research from the Toronto District Board of Education. They found that while teachers and school administrators are overwhelmingly supportive of STEM, more than a third of the teachers report not being entirely comfortable with an authentic engineering design process as a strategy to teach STEM. So engineers in the room? Yeah, we need you. We need you to help us as teachers to figure out how do we make that authentic? How do we make that learning authentic for students? Let's see, 40% of teachers wondered if they have the necessary background and skills. 23% said that they didn't really know anything about current STEM careers and emerging STEM careers. And let's be honest, does anybody in this room know about emerging STEM careers? We know about maybe 5 years out. We don't know what's out there. So how do we get some of that information out to them? I think that there's a few things that we can do. We can help to support curriculum with authentic resources. Authentic, by what I mean by that is real and simulated data sets and field notes from the experts. Let's let our students actually work with real stuff, not the made up stuff in their textbook, some real stuff. Let's place students in your roles. Let's show them the importance of collaboration between individuals who bring diverse knowledge and skill sets to the problem. Let's give them a real-world experience because, as Frank Smith, who is a psycholinguist, says, all learning pivots on who we think we are and who we think we are capable of becoming. So important. Learning is about who we think we are right now and who we think we're capable of becoming. They are all capable of becoming innovators in some way or fashion. We need them to understand that piece. Okay, the second conduit is parents. We know that where parents support and encourage their daughters to go into STEM or take STEM courses, they are twice as likely to continue in that field. However, the stats tell us that dads are less likely to support their daughters in pursuing STEM than mothers. Isn't that interesting? They're less likely to support their daughters. So they need to step up to do that. I think, developing curiosity and questioning maybe is the thing that parents can do the best. When my kids are adults now, but when they were little, our dinner conversations always began with, what good question did you ask today? So if you have little ones, try it. What good question did you ask today? What it did was it put the emphasis on the questioning and the curiosity more so than the answer. And they started to look for, what questions can I ask today before I get to dinner, because Mom's going to ask me. And so some of those things might be like, why do the dandelions grow in this part of the schoolyard, not in this part? Those are great questions. I don't necessarily know the answer right off the top, but we can find out, and it's worth pursuing. So if you are a teacher and you have parent-teacher interviews and you want to encourage parents to do something about STEM, tell them to just support questioning and curiosity in their home. They don't need to do all the other stuff. They need to support that questioning. And tell your friends as well that that's what they can be doing. All right, creating an innovation environment. Tony Wagner, as I told you, is one of my mentors, although he doesn't know it. And he says he's interviewed lots of innovators in their 20s and asked them, so what was it about your parents or your teachers or your mentors that got you where you are today as an innovator? And they all came up with these 3 things, which I think are so important. They said all of those adults encourage them to engage in exploratory play, unstructured play, unencumbered by screen time or by hovering adults, just unstructured play. He also said that developing their own individual passion was so important, whether that was intellectual or artistic. The adults supported that. And lastly, they said all of the adults in our lives that made a difference focused on developing a sense of purpose, giving back, doing something for others, and developing a sense of social entrepreneurship. How are we doing those 3 things with our mentees and with our classes? So that's the question I have for you today, is how do we do that for every child? I don't know. I don't have all the answers, for sure. But I would like to share with you, do I have time to share? Go? Okay. I'd like to share with you just one project that I'm involved with, and Danielle mentioned it a little bit in terms of bringing scientists and teachers together. I was so fortunate as a researcher to be able to work with the Professional Association of Scientists, which is Sigma Psi, and the U of C Biogeoscience Institute out in Kananaskis. And we together developed a project in which we brought teachers and scientists together, middle school and high school teachers with scientists, to look at how can we take their research and make it accessible to students in the classroom. We had 3 reasons for trying to do that. We wanted to support scientists in communicating their research to the public so that they could actually share their expertise as widely as possible. We wanted to empower teachers to re-engage with the science that they had fallen in love with in university and maybe lost along the way, and to increase their comfort with STEM. And we wanted to make current and authentic scientific research accessible to middle school and high school students. Now, you may think that that was a fool's errand, especially if you are involved in really technical and specialized work yourself. How on earth were we going to get those papers, those primary scientific literature papers that are written at this level for a very, very specialized audience and have them accessible to grade 8 students? And yeah, it was tough, and there was lots of skepticism about how we were doing it, why we were doing it, whether it was worth it. We did it because we were absolutely convinced that this would be a way to get scientific research, current scientific research, into the hands of young people, and that it would be so much better than what they were seeing in their textbooks. Of course, scientists and teachers have collaborated before. It wasn't new from that perspective. We had never seen in the literature, though, that scientists and teachers actually co-authored new research articles from the original. That had not been done before. And we also knew that no one yet had looked at the focus on innovation and social entrepreneurship as a result of that. So why primary scientific literature? Well, Field and Powell talk a lot about the research, the global research agenda. And what really hit us was this last sentence. Few people even know what research is being conducted, much less understand why it's being done and what the potential implications might be. If, as a public, we don't know what the research is, we don't know why it's being done, we can't support it, we won't support it, and we won't get involved in it. So that's why we chose adapted primary literature, or adapting primary literature. All right, so very, very quickly, because I'm looking at the time, how did we do it? Well, first of all, we went to the U of C and we looked at current literature that was coming out of the Faculty of Science. We took all those publications and we then determined which ones best suit the Alberta curriculum. And we found lots of good places in grade 8 science, in biology 20 and biology 30. And we could have found others, but we focused. Then we got the principal investigators together with all the teachers and a few grad students, and they explained the research to the teachers. And together as a group, they then developed activities, investigations that could occur in the classroom, so in a grade 8 classroom, that would simulate what the researchers had done in the field. It's quite phenomenal. And then the grad students and the teachers rewrote the primary article so that it was accessible to students without losing the rigor and the canonical nature of the original. Okay? So it still talked about the research question. How did they come up with it? What were the hypotheses? What procedures did they use? How did they collect data? What were their interpretations and why did they get those interpretations? What we added was accessible language and lots of graphs, graphics, images, things like that that would help to support the text. I hope you won't be amazed to know that students were very comfortable with dealing with this different kind of text. It took a while, but they could do it. And sometimes we don't give them the credit for being able to do that. It also caused teachers and students to start asking questions that came from their own curiosity. So this is what the scientists did. I have a question. What if? What would happen if? How might we? And so that sense of curiosity was developed not just in a few kids, in the whole group of students. So APL has the potential to provide students and teachers with more authentic approaches to science. So as I wind up here, I want to bring your attention back to why I'm sharing all of this with you. It's about scalability, getting to every kid. It's about innovation, creating innovators. And it's about social entrepreneurship. And so the examples that I have given you today were not one-on-one mentorships. Dr. Costerton, Dr. Dinh never ever knew, I don't think, that because of them, I ended up in cell biology. But boy, their work did it. Their work got me there because I was exposed to it. I'm so pleased, actually, that as one of our APL Adapted Primary Literature articles, we actually touched on Dr. Costerton's work. There was a new set of research that came out of the University of Calgary using biofilms in oil sands tailing ponds. And so for me, that brought me a huge amount of personal satisfaction that his legacy of innovation is doing the full circle, coming back to inspire new investigators. And so what I'm asking you to think about in your groups today is not to change our mentorship understanding, but to expand it. How can we get to every child, not just the few who are fortunate to be in some of these programs? So I'm asking you to be not afraid to disrupt your traditional notion of mentorship and make it even better, because truly, if we do this well, it will boggle the mind. Thank you.